of waiting so long. A song to bring hope for us, a song we must sing. This song's a must. I'm tired of waiting, but I'm still hoping that one day that song it will be ringing in my ears. I wanna hear Caribbean voices sing in perfect harmony together, a bond of hearts, minds, and souls, reaching for a common goal. When I hear Caribbean voices sing, all in tune with each other, Caribbean choirs 10 million strong, singing a true Caribbean song. Caribbean voices sing in perfect harmony together, a bond of hearts, minds, and souls, reaching for a common goal. When I hear Caribbean voices sing, all in tune with each other, Caribbean choirs 10 million strong, singing a true Caribbean song.
Someone help me. I want you to stay. sunshine, coconut water and rum. She's fine, and she's my island woman. To see her dance the soca to the tango beat, dance the Macarena. Ooh, she is so sweet. She takes you much higher with the mighty power. She's fine, and she's my island woman. Hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do. She's fine, and she's my island woman. She's my island woman. Hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do, hot diggity diggity do, hot diggity do. She's fine, and she's my island woman. And she's my island woman. She's fine, and she's my island woman.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. I must say they did a very good job. Thank you so much. It is at this time we're going to ask Pastor Andrew Campbell. Come to the stage, please. Please stand at this time, ladies and gentlemen.
Very good evening. Good evening. Let's bow our head in prayer. Almighty and everlasting God, creator and architect of this universe, we come before you this evening, humble, thankful, for all your mercies, your blessing, your kindness, your love, your grace. Father, we acknowledge that we can do nothing before you. And Father, as we stand here this evening in your presence, we ask God that you will bless these proceedings, that you will bless the Prime Minister, Mayor Motley, and her cabinet members. We pray, God, that you will just touch them, that God, that you will increase their wisdom and their knowledge, that they will lead this country in the way that you want them to lead. We pray blessings too on Minister Payne, who is the patron of this foundation. And we pray, God, that you would touch all of them who worked so hard to make this evening what it is going to be. Father, we thank you for life. We thank you for all the things that you've done for us in the past and the things that you will continue to do for us in the present. Bless us now, Father. Touch us, God, from the crown of our head to the sole of our feet. And we ask all these things in no other name than His Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
You may be seated, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. The Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, QC MP, the Prime Minister of Barbados, and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, the Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew, the Honorable George Payne, QC, MP, and the Chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, members of the Cabinet of Barbados, members of Parliament, President of the Senate, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Deputy President of the Senate, and members of the Senate, representatives of the private sector, the media, specially invited guests, the Barbados Labour Party family, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the home of Ermie Bourne, the magnificent parish of St. Andrew, and to the Alleyne School.
Tonight, we have returned to the Alleyne School for the second Ermie Bourne lecture. Once again, we are proud to be your Masters of Ceremony for this evening. My name is Sonia Small-Owls.
And my name is Sonia King.
Together, we are Sonia Squared. The St. Andrew branch of the Barbados Labour Party, the Thursday Club, and the Ermie Bourne Foundation, under the patronage of the Honorable George Payne, host the second Ermie Bourne lecture entitled Community-Based Enterprise Development in Challenging Economic Times, a rural perspective being presented by our fellow Senator Lisa Cummins. It is at this time that we will invite Ms. Natalie Murray to present the welcome. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
The Right Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable George Walton Payne, Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew, President of the Senate, Sir Richard Cheltenham, Ministers of Government, Senators, Parliamentary Representatives, members of National Council, former parliamentarians, Stella, Lady St. John, wife of the late Prime Minister Sir Harold St. John, members of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, dignitaries, special invited guests, media personnel, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Natalie Murray, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the second annual Ermie Bourne Lecture in the beautiful, breathtaking parish of St. Andrew. This year's presentation on community-based enterprise development in challenging economic times, a rural perspective, will be presented by Senator Lisa Cummins. Senator Cummins has a wealth of knowledge and vast experience in regional and international community development. I can therefore think of no one better to deliver this evening's lecture. I speak with such confidence as I have known Senator Cummins for many years, and one thing that has remained the same is her high standard of excellence. My memories of Senator Cummins are of her as a young girl guide at Parks Hill under the leadership of the then guider, Miss Gibson. Senator Cummins was always very eager and excited when completing projects, badges, and assigned tasks. Her enthusiasm and demand for excellence has never wavered. So I know how excited she must be to share with us this evening. I therefore urge you to sit up because she will give a riveting presentation. As a rural parish, St. Andrew, steeped in agriculture, pottery, and many small businesses, this topic is very important for further social and economical development. This evening stands out as testimony to the firm contribution that Dame Ermie Bourne brought to St. Andrew through developmental projects such as the Girls Industrial Union for Needlework, constructing the industrial wing here at the Alleyne School, and the development of the Belle Plaine housing area. Evidently, this work continues today by Parliamentary Representative Honorable George Walton Payne, and is seen by the implementation of housing projects and improvements to the road network across St. Andrew. Mr. Payne is passionate about the development of the people of St. Andrew, and there is no doubt in my mind that their needs always come first. After 25 years with Mr. Payne, I have concluded that total member involvement, a strong sense of loyalty, and the ability to make each member feel valued are the reasons why the same loyal, dedicated, and committed members of the branch are still with him for almost 3 decades. This is what true people's representation is all about. And to you, Honorable George Walton Payne, St. Andrew says thank you. This evening is also representative of the kind of committed developmental strategy and far-reaching policies of the Mia Amor-led Barbados Labour Party administration has for the rejuvenation for Barbados and the enfranchisement of ordinary citizens as outlined as one of the principles in the Covenant of Hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbados is on the rise, and it starts right here in the parish of St. Andrew. Your attendance here is not only beneficial to you, the attendees, but it will set the tone for other communities to emulate as well. So once again, welcome on the behalf of the parliamentary representative, the Honorable George Walton Payne, affectionately known as the Mayor of St. Andrew, and the members of the Ermie Bourne Foundation. Thank you.
Let's give a warm round of applause to Natalie. That speech, her welcome was tremendous. We have a slight change in our program this evening, and before we get to Misha White on stage, we're going to welcome the parish ambassadors. We're going to ask the current parish ambassadors to come on stage, Miss Diamond Payne and Mr. Damon Boyce, and they will make a presentation on behalf of the parish ambassadors for St. Andrew. Thank you.
Hi, good night.
Good night. The Right Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, Mayor Omar Motley, Member of Parliament for St. Andrew, George Payne, other members of Parliament, members of the Senate, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
My name is Diamond Payne, and I am the proud female ambassador for the parish of St. Andrew for 2019.
I am Damon Boyce, and I am very happy to be the male ambassador for St. Andrew for 2019.
Our parish budget for 2019 throughout to 2020 is entitled St. Andrew will come from, our history, our culture, our future, our choice. The project, which spans 2 years, focuses on rejuvenating business activity in St. Andrew while seeking to record the parish's richly built and natural heritage for current and future generations to come.
It is believed that in order to know where you are going, you must first understand where you came from. Therefore, we did our research and identified a number of heroes whom would have played a vital role in development of St. Andrew.
We found that one common thing throughout these heroes was that they were all entrepreneurs in their own right. From this, we conceptualized the 4 key components of our project. Stimulating economic activity. Throughout this year, we have held a number of events which would have engaged small businesses throughout the parish.
Component 2, developing new business and entrepreneurs. To this end, we held the first in a series of workshops for entrepreneurs to give them some advice on the avenues available to them while they are starting up a business.
Component 3, assisting current business owners to expand in their businesses. Through the workshop and through outreach using the St. Andrew Business Directory, which was formulated through a previous parish project. In addition, we have formulated a mentorship program to help guide these businesses in the area which they would need the most assistance. This program will be rolled out shortly.
Component 4, recording the heritage of St. Andrew. This is twofold, as we have already identified the heroes as well as a number of heritage sites which are for great significance to the parish. We will seek to update the mobile app, the St. Andrew Experience, which was also a previous parish project, with the information found. Look out for the relaunch of the app in 2020, available for download free of cost from the Google Play Store and also for Apple and Android devices.
These local heroes which were identified are Dame Edna Ermie Bourne, Mr. Delbert Lynch,
Miss Irma Rock and Mr. Casper Nichols,
Sir Conrad Hunt, and Mr. Arlington DaCosta Edwards.
Our heroes have proven to be pioneers, leaders, and entrepreneurs in their own unique ways, and through this, we charted our own path to developing and existing businesses and assisting with the setup of new businesses within St. Andrew. The timelines of the lecture to come by Senator Lisa Cummins is more than relevant to the development and establishing of entrepreneurial opportunities within our parish of St. Andrew.
We do look forward to having your continued support along our journey as ambassadors.
Ladies and gentlemen,
St. Andrew will come from, our history, our culture, our future, our choice. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I got excited when they said they were developing an app for St. Andrew. So please, could you give that a clap? Because I think there's some beautiful places in St. Andrew and some beautiful experiences to be had. It is at this time that I'm going to ask one of our trustees of the Ermie Bourne Foundation to make a presentation, Mr. Misha White.
All protocols being established. Tonight I am tasked with presenting a synopsis of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, its accomplishments and plans for the future. Founded last year, 2018, the foundation is a memorial charity trust established to pay homage to Dame Edna Ermie Bourne. The core objectives of this foundation are focused around the improvement of the standard of living among the people of St. Andrew, the empowerment of women in community service and public life, as well as the creation of opportunities for the poor and more vulnerable members of rural society across Barbados. Since its establishment just over a year ago, the foundation celebrated the centennial birthday of Ermie Bourne and marked it with the Ermie Bourne Centennial Award, which was presented to Mr. Simeon Belgrave. We also convened a special church service and carried out a wreath laying ceremony. The inaugural Ermie Bourne lecture was also successfully held in 2018. This lecture was presented by Senator Rommel Springer, entitled Ermie Bourne, Pioneer and Champion of the People. Looking towards the future, the Foundation plans to embark on a number of activities towards the achievement of our goals and coupled with the realization of the vision of Ermie Bourne. Most significantly, we wish to acquire the last residence of Ermie Bourne, which will be utilized as a museum, as well as to provide a platform for persons in the St. Andrew community to be involved in various activities, as well as to empower women. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of our proceedings.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next segment is our entertainment segment. And our first entertainer will be Mr. Jamal Slocum. Please put your hands together for Mr. Jamal Slocum.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, sometimes things happen in normal activity. So we have a slight change again to our program, and we're going to ask you to welcome dancers from St. Andrew who are choreographed by Miss Shakira White, and she is one of the members of our constituency, and she is the one who's choreographed this dance. So we ask you to put your hands together and welcome them as they come on stage. Thank you.
chemistry. I know in this long, long time, that's my remedy for peace of mind. And even if you stumble, just remain humble. I'm not ashamed to say that yes, I fall, but I gonna gain. See, my journey will never go in vain. No, no. Yes, I fall, but I gonna gain. See, this journey will never go in vain. No, no. That's why you gotta push. You gotta push and go through. You gotta push. You gotta push and go through. You gotta push. We gonna push and go through all the way. Yeah, yeah. I never see so much obstacle before. Never. I got to pray some more. I got to try and forget about it. So let me go back to my jam. So let me go back to my jam. You got to push.
Thank you so much. That dance again was choreographed by Shakira White. At this time, we are going to have our musical rendition from our band, Bajan Green Band, but we are also going to ask Jamal Slocum to come on stage. In the interim, we are going to have this opportunity to introduce our trustees. So we're going to just let you become familiar with the Ermie Bourne Foundation trustees. Let us introduce our patron, the Honorable George Walton Payne. I don't believe he has to stand. Everyone knows him. Thank you, Minister Payne. Mr. Simeon Belgriff is our chairman. Mr. Belgriff, please stand. And he was the recipient of the first Ermie Bourne Award last year. One of our trustees is half of the Sonia Squared, which would be Sonia Small Als. She would have been on stage before. Victor Goddard is usually with us. I'm not sure if he is in the audience this evening. Victor, are you here? No? Well, then Mr. Darwin Goodrich is also a trustee. Mr. Goodrich, if you can stand. Mr. Goodrich is at the back. Mr. Goodrich is the backbone of the St. Andrew constituency. At times, every Thursday night, he'll be there. And he likes the background, which is why he's currently seated in the back. Roger Hudson should be around somewhere with a camera. Roger, just wave so everyone can see you. Sonia King. I am also a trustee of the foundation. Natalie Murray, who gave that warm welcome. Everyone knows Natalie. She's also a part of the foundation. Kerry Phillips. Kerry is an usher this evening, but if she can just wave a hand to indicate where she is, she's also a trustee. Tamisha White, who would have given the presentation on behalf of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, she's also a trustee. Amber Blackman, who's in backstage assisting at this time. And there are other members who are not here this evening. We just want to give them an honorable mention. These persons would include Pauline Lowe, Sharon Seeley, Jewel Barrow, and others. Is the band ready at this time? Okay, so the band is ready now, and we're going to ask Jamal Slocum to come forward and share his song with us. And we're also going to enjoy the band, Bajan Green, the band. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's try that again. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty. I am pleased to be here with you this evening, and we're sharing a message, one that is encouraging, one that is to inspire, one that is to pave the way to ensure that our leaders here this evening are reminded that we as Barbadians have full confidence in them. But not only that, the road is not going to be easy. The road is never going to be just a walk down the road. So I decided that I would do this song this evening just as a reminder. Let's go. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough, and friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Ooh, when you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part. Oh, when times get rough, and friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Ooh, sail on, silver curl, won't you sail on by? Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way. See how they shine, Lord, when you needed that friend. I'm sailing right behind, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down, lay me down. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I want to say my last year, this is what they call it. My name is Ermie Bourne. Hope you enjoy yourself so far. Yeah. Oh, red, red wine, close to my head, makes me forget that I still need you so. Red, red wine, it's up to you.
They say we're young and we don't know. Won't find out until we grow.
Well, I don't know, maybe that's true. You got me, and baby, I've got you. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
Just say our love won't pay the rent. Before it's earned, our money's always spent.
Well, I don't know, I don't got no luck. At least I'm sure of all the things we got.
Babe,
I got you, babe. I got you, babe.
I got you, babe. I got flowers in the spring.
I've got you to wear my ring.
And when I'm sad, you're a clown. And when I get scared, you're always around. So let them say your hair so long. I don't care if you, I can't go wrong.
I got you, babe. 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 I've got you, babe. Somebody give it up for young Alorana. Sing the song.
Hey. Yeah. People talk, that's what they do, but they just don't understand how Mr. Love push and through. Yes, they laugh, they call me names, but they just don't get it. All they see me, I pull my hey. When they see me, they just keep on talking. When I see them, I just keep on walking. I've got my pride, me not gonna show me my side. Some of them will see me as a big pushover. Let me fit them and think I'm gonna kill over. Oh no, not I. I will survive. Never let them get you down. Never let them see you frown. Never let them take away your liberty. Live your life and be free. Never let them get you down. Never let them see you frown. Never let them lead you astray. Starting today, live your life and live it your way. People talk, people talk. Yeah. Yo, give it up for my brother Sluggy Man. Hey.
Skanking, grooving, hallelujah, yeah. Skanking, grooving, yeah. Here we go again now. Skanking, grooving, under pressure, yeah. Skanking, grooving, yeah. Under the pressures of life and it's tough. Now stay down, mama, time to get up. Now bother with the downfall styles, bring it up full of vibes, yes. Now pick it up, keep the bills, them your rent and your mortgage due, yeah. When your best friends are gone and it's only you, yeah. Turn to the mics, stand quick screen, 'cause everybody wanna feel like me. Because you're traveling rock with me. And you know sister, I give music sweet, yeah, yeah. Everybody wanna feel like me. Forget your troubles and rock with me, yeah. Music sweet, yeah, yeah. Preach to the bridge. trouble is a harmony. Bring everything together. All every storm together. Who's it like the world? Does everyone got this trouble? Help me make it, Lord. Help me get through my troubles. Can't get sweet. Cause everybody wanna feel like forget your trouble and rock with me. You know, see the reggae music sweet. Yeah, yeah. Everybody wanna feel like rock with me. You know, see the reggae music sweet. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Watch on. Must be confusion in her mind. Sing and use your finding a garbage. Sometimes, or not all the time. Sometimes, yeah. Woman, you got time yesterday. Then more again today. Think you can program. I live me one damn life. Telling friends and family how I am handsome guy. I don't get twisted now, baby. Don't expect no more than what we already have. Keeping it simple. Don't expect no more than what we already have. Keeping it simple. Yeah, God, you already have a man, but I can be yours sometime. Not all the time, so can you already have a man? I can be yours. Baby, call me. Not all the time, so you take a wine with me sometime. You take a wine with me sometime. You can find me sometime, but not all the time, so you take a wine with me sometime. You take a wine with me sometime. You can wine with me sometime, but not all the time, so watch out, great tune. Thank you.
Yo, you know sometimes it's feel down. You gotta stand firm and walk on it, you know what I mean? Blessings. All you gotta do is get up and pray, and you will see that thing.
Listen, look, wait, sorry, very sorry, but this song written and arranged by this young lady here, all done by her, so please give her a rosy round of applause. Thank you very much. I had to plug that. Bring you.
All you gotta do is get up and pray, and you will see that things will go the right way. You will not go through all the pain. You will see the sunshine again. Sometimes life is hard, and you don't know what to do. The feelings tearing you apart, taking control over you, and you're thinking, how are you gonna get through? And how you gonna change your cloudy skies blue? Always remember that the Father loves you, yes, and He has faith in you. All you gotta do is get up and pray, and you will see that things will go the right way. You will not go through all the pain, yeah, and you will see the sunshine again, yeah. All you gotta do is get up. Hey. Thank you.
is the final tune. Amorano and Beijing Green. Oh, yeah. I'm from a place with the nice breeze that blow. I'm from a place that with the pretty gas flow. Always keep it real and then we move in a row. Money, yeah, my girl, you can call it cash flow. But we can keep it real if you wanna. New Janet City is hotter than the sun. Breezy nighttime, but no winter. Always up in the silence of mentions, boy. You're moving us over the home, good. I'm stronger than it. Oh, good. I to the top and it's oh, good. Oh, good. You're moving us over the oh, good. I'm stronger than it. Oh, good. I to the top and it's oh, good. International. Ladies and gentlemen.
From a place of beautiful beaches, where ladies and beautiful species, to love my homegrown, accept the sweeter than a snow cone. Nothing like when you can roast a breadfruit on the beach, where the sky is bright blue. Some place you can open up, same place you can take a coconut. Yeah,
you be not over there.
Oh, good.
I'm stronger than it.
Oh, good.
I'm to the top and it's
Oh, good.
International.
Oh, good.
You be not over there.
Oh, good.
I'm strong.
Oh, good.
To the top and it's
Oh, good. Oh, good.
On bass guitar, we got my brother Gavin.
Oh, good.
Ladies and gentlemen, on bass guitar. Very, very, very talented young man. All very own still. On rhythm and lead guitar, we have Ashley Time. On keys. On the keys. Saving the best for last. I can't do it right. We did it with the youngsters. Saving the best for last on drums. My boy, my brother. Extremely gifted young man on drums. Now go! Play, 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 play. Give them a lick cup. Give them a lick cup. Give them a, give them a, give them a lick. Give them a lick. Give them, give them a. Come. Give them a lick. Yes. You give them a lick. Yes. You give them a, give them a, give them a. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, good. The green is for the youngsters. Thank you very, 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 very much. Please give this youngster a round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, Beijing Green the band. Another round of applause for them, please. As they make their way off the stage, we want to continue to introduce members of the foundation. And we want to take this opportunity to recognize the secretary, Miss Tricia Henry. Tricia has been very instrumental in this evening's proceedings. Tricia, if you can identify yourself. She's probably backstage doing some type of thing. The treasurer, Mr. Douglas Skeet. Mr. Skeet, our treasurer, thank you very much. And let's just applaud again the dance choreographed by Miss Shakira White, sung by Mr. Jamal Slocum, and Bajan Green, the band. At this time, we would like to take the opportunity to ask our Senator Dr. Rommel Springer to introduce the keynote speaker for this evening. Senator Dr. Rommel Springer is the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. Senator Dr. Rommel Springer, please come and introduce the keynote speaker for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Masters of Ceremony. Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley. Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew, the Honorable George Walton Payne. Deputy President of the Senate, the Honorable Mr. Greenidge, Rudolph Greenidge. Members of the BLP family, members of the House of Assembly, members of the Senate, members of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, specially invited guests, members of the media, good evening. Tonight, as we seek to commemorate the life of Ermie Bourne as a trailblazer for women in St. Andrew and beyond, it is my special privilege to introduce our featured speaker, who I have the pleasure of interacting with closely as a Senate colleague. Lisa Cummins is no stranger to most of us. Even at her young age, she has had a distinguished career nationally, regionally, and internationally. This evening, she will be sharing her thoughts on what I think is an important topic in this space and in this current period. Her lecture is rightly titled Community-Based Enterprise Development in Challenging Economic Times, a Rural Perspective. But before I invite her, please allow me to give you some insight into her professional life and interests. And as difficult as it is, given her long and distinguished professional career, I will try to be brief. A former career diplomat, for 10 years she served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, where she covered the United Nations. She was later posted to the Barbados Embassy in Washington, where she served from 2001 to 2004. An international trade specialist by training, she joined the Commonwealth Secretariat in 2008 as a trade policy advisor and was posted to Uganda, where she spent 3 years. With extensive experience in regional economic integration, trade policy development, private sector development, and trade, Ms. Cummins was invited to return to Barbados to head the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries, a role in which she served for 4 years until she was recruited by the University of the West Indies to head the international consulting company, Lumen UWI Consulting, Inc. Her breadth of international and regional development experience enables her to lead teams which provide advisory services to Caribbean institutions, including the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the Development Bank of Jamaica, the Caribbean Development Bank, and numerous governments. She's also the chair of the Barbados Port Inc., a member of the National Cruise Commission, a member of the board of directors of the Sridhar Ransfeld Center for Trade Policy and Trade Law, and the Barbados Cruise Terminal Inc. She's also heavily involved in community service as assistant governor of the Rotary Club of Barbados, and is a founding member of the International Women's Forum Barbados chapter. Lisa was born in Workman's St. George, but she's no stranger to the constituency of St. Andrew. You see, she was married into St. Andrew, and she spent 10 years in Orange Hill at the Bethel Pentecostal Church as a youth leader. And she jokingly mentioned to me that our very own trustee, Amber Blackman, still refers to her as Auntie Lisa. In May 2018, Lisa Cummins was appointed by the government of Barbados to serve as a senator in the upper house of Parliament, where she has proven to be an excellent orator and a formidable debater on almost any topic. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our featured speaker this evening, Senator Lisa Cummins.
Good night to the beautiful parish of St. Andrew, Madam Prime Minister, Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Parliamentary Representative for the constituency of St. Andrew, the Honorable George Payne, and patron of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, and of course this event, members of Parliament in the lower house, and my colleagues from the upper house in the Senate, specially invited guests. I see some of my own colleagues from the Bridgetown Port have come out tonight to join us, so happy to see you. Barbados Labour Party family, good night. So my colleague, Senator Springer, he talked a little bit about St. Andrew. It's true. Amber does still call me Auntie Lisa, as do many others, because what people may not know is that for those 10 years in Orange Hill, I was not only a youth leader, but a worship leader. So I know that the talent that we saw tonight on this stage in St. Andrew is not abnormal. This is the norm for St. Andrew. I have met some of the best musicians, singers in this parish. And so it's pretty impressive when you could sing a song sung by the Minister of Culture and Sports, the Honorable John King, in his presence, and he did it admirably, so well done. Tonight, when I started to figure out what I was going to talk about, Ramel kept saying to me, for the better part of a year, what is your theme, Lisa? I said, I don't know. 6 months out, what is your theme, Lisa? I think it's something to do with rural development. I'm not sure. And then one day I gave him a theme and I said, okay, but I'm going to come and zoom in a little bit more. And for weeks he kept saying to me, Lisa, what is your theme? And I finally gave him the theme that you have now as my speech tonight. But I want to pause for a moment and welcome my colleague and longtime friend, the Honorable Minister of Education, Ms. Santia Bradshaw. I'm welcoming her in particular because at this time, 1 year ago, Ramel stood on this platform and he said, our prayers are with you, Santia. And it was a week after she had announced her diagnosis. And so it is a great privilege to have you here with us tonight, Santia. But when I gave Ramel the theme and we agreed on what I was going to be talking about, I could not have expected that just about 3 weeks ago, I would come with my better half here to an entrepreneurship event here in St. Andrew in this hall, and it would be on rural enterprise, and it would be on entrepreneurship in rural communities. And I said, Father, you've blessed me in St. Andrew, you've blessed me again, so I've chosen a topic that is perfectly in sync with what is being discussed right now in the parish. So tonight, I'm honored once again to be welcomed into St. Andrew, back into your bosom, and I'm honored to be able to deliver just a few thoughts on Dame Ermie Bourne's legacy and what this means for us in a modern incarnation. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for welcoming me the second time around. Yesterday, we spent the better part of the day, at least I did, with a group of creatives. We were talking about the creation of a new Faculty of Culture, Minister King, and we were having a series of consultations with stakeholders. And we had representatives from different groups, and as I listened to them, one of the emerging themes that struck me was that we are not telling our stories. We talk about Barbadian identity, we talk about authenticity. Prime Minister calls it national consciousness. And all of these things are important because it tells us who we are, and more importantly, where we are going. The need to tell our stories is a part of who we are. It tells those who are coming after us where we've been, the hills and the valleys, the triumphs and the failures. And Dame Ermie Bourne is a classic example of why those stories need to be told. When I was growing up, I knew the names of almost every movie star. I knew the names of excellent writers. I knew the names of phenomenal women like Maya Angelou and great writers like Toni Morrison. I knew great political leaders like Margaret Thatcher. And I also knew great advocates, great stalwarts of advocacy and resistance. I knew Mother Teresa. But I did not know many of my own stories. Many of our own young people do not know the story of Dame Ermie Bourne. And last year, when the parish of St. Andrew, the Ermie Bourne Foundation, started this lecture, it struck me yesterday as I was speaking to the creatives that this is a critical part of us telling our stories. It is a part of us saying to our young people today, this is how we have come this far, and this is where we are going next. But a road to get here has not been easy. And these are the things that we are able to see accomplished in our communities because of the legacy of those like Ermie Bourne. Many of us don't know that we are descended from strong stock. When you hear about the legacy of Dame Ermie and many others, there were formidable women. Like most of the Labour Party women I know, normally that is true, but she was a formidable woman. Thankfully, this generation, at least the one coming behind it as well, has already started to sing songs of Auntie Mia. But we have to make sure that the history of the first female prime minister of this country, just like the first female elected black woman parliamentarian of this country, can also be told in terms of their contribution to our development and to our stories. Last week, I was in a meeting and I heard one of our senior disaster officials, and he says to me in the meeting, and I believe Minister Sandra Husbands was in that meeting, he said, I have been doing this for 32 years. And never before in our history has the issue of climate change and disaster preparedness been elevated to the forefront and given such national prominence as has been done by Prime Minister Motley. In 10 years, in 20 years, we have to be able to tell the story to our young people, as we're going to be doing tonight and in the time to come about Dame Ermie, of Prime Minister Motley's contribution as a first woman to national dialogues on issues like climate change. I, like many others, only knew the Dame Ermie Bourne Highway as the East Coast Road. I never knew the why of the naming, and I never knew that she walked the length and the breadth of the Parish of St. Andrew, advocating for the voiceless, championing a cause for those that without her presence would have been invisible, speaking on behalf of the landless and elevating issues like poverty, social exclusion, disenfranchisement to the front of the table and to the front of the national discourse in a way that would not have been the case had she not done what she did. So her story is important. And tonight, and all other nights like it, must continue to be a part of our national development process. So who was Dame Ermie Bourne? And why should she be recognized as an icon in our history? Last year, my colleague Senator Dr. Ramel Springer, he gave an excellent biography and he mapped in great detail who she was, what she did, some of her key accomplishments. And if you go over that lecture, it is a wealth of knowledge that is being presented on what we can see as a phenomenal woman. I want tonight to build on a couple of things, starting with that history. I want to start with one first key message. And I've already started to share that, and it is the importance of telling our stories. The second message is that the result of telling those stories is that people have to understand that in order to get anywhere, it takes struggle. It will take hard work and successful and successive installations of effort to get us there. So I want to spend a few moments talking about four main key themes that she has, as a result of her work and her legacy, paved the way for us to be here tonight. First of all, I want to talk about the question of poverty. All over the world, in every jurisdiction, in every economy, rich and poor, the question of poverty remains the key issue facing development leaders all around the world. The issue has engaged world leaders in every summit, in every global conference, and in every town hall meeting, in every community center, far and near. Dame Ermie Bourne, she was not a cabinet minister. She did not have the eminence of being a national leader, but at the level of the grassroots, right here in her community, right here in Belle Plaine, she brought the question of issues of poverty to the national table. As a parliamentarian, as a civic leader, she understood that poverty required a community-based engagement, that programs needed to be developed which were sustainable and uplifting. People needed to feel as though there was a place for them at the table. They needed to have an opportunity to have personal mobility, income and social mobility, and they had to have an opportunity to make way for their successors. Her story tells us that we do not need to be at the pinnacle of leadership. We don't need to wait for our prime ministers or our ministers or every world leader in global summits and conferences to come to conclusions on how to resolve poverty. They are a part of our conversation, but every community leader, every citizen, every social service group, every church group has a role to play in mapping the conversation on poverty. We have to be able to deliver meaningful and impactful change, but that requires where I started, identity. I am because you are. This is the African concept of Ubuntu. This requires consciousness. I cannot have and you go without. I cannot climb unless I take others with me. That is community. That is how organic poverty is treated to at the level of people and the community. The second issue that I want to deal with, which was also a recurring theme for Dame Ermie, and I'm building the foundation, was the family. She started her messaging with the family. Family was then, as it must remain now, the foundation of communities and societies. Because as long as vulnerability, poverty, and weak family structures perpetuate themselves, deeper problems, including crime, will emerge. So here is her insistence on the provision of things like community health care, Those things affirm for us that in a modern incarnation, community polyclinics operating on a 24-hour basis, trained first responders in communities are the absolute right policy direction for our country in 2019, because healthy communities and healthy families build a strong nation. She taught us that. Her commitment then to training plantation laborers and women who needed to augment their incomes tell us that training, education, and capacity building are key pillars of our development. And they tell us also that the introduction of free tertiary level education was absolutely the right choice for Barbados, because investment in education helps to build strong communities. We know in this Barbados Labour Party that we don't intend our leaders to roll over in their graves. So we will honor our legacies. We commit to education. The current First Jobs program and the Civil Corps are also, because of the legacy of someone like Dame Ermie, the right choices for Barbados. And I believe that she would laud these measures as admirable, because they ensure that families at their most vulnerable have safe spaces where they can feed their ambition at every level through education and training. The past few years, friends, family, have been difficult. And the past year in leadership has been, no doubt, grueling. And I'm sure there is a national conversation ongoing about how many hours Prime Minister does not sleep, and how hard our ministers work, and how they balance their constituencies and their ministries. Grueling probably is an understatement. Weak economic conditions at the national level have translated into hardships in many of the communities that our colleagues serve. And at the same time, these communities have fewer resources available for stabilization and revitalization. But considerable work is going on nonetheless. And tonight, I will focus on a few examples of how Dame Ermie's flagship projects were arguably before her time and can be relevant to the development of new rural enterprise models. Honourable Minister, Honourable Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew, this parish should have a front row seat at the table to discuss issues like food security and renewable energy generation. The communities in this parish should be key to discussions on the green economy, areas like sustainable agriculture, agricultural education, research, agro-processing, niches like ecotourism, and community enterprise development. There is an opportunity for a resurgence of St. Andrew in these difficult times, because of these difficult times. In 2016, the Inter-American Development Bank did a study, a survey of living conditions, and it affirmed what many of us already know. Poverty affects rural communities differently than it affects urban communities. The incidence of poverty in rural communities inevitably is also higher, but measured differently than in urban communities. In St. Andrew, the IDB in 2016 measured that St. Andrew was around 4% of persons living in extreme poverty and around 2.9% of persons living in poverty. The level of vulnerability was also quite concerning. But what was interesting is that of those numbers, about 57% of those considered to be vulnerable were also women. What that says to us is that St. Andrew has a distinct challenge to treat with as it relates to the questions of poverty and how it impacts households. 57% of households were headed by women. That means that in this parish, we have to create programs that empower those women, that provide them with the resources to augment their incomes. That's what Dame Ermie did. With the scale of the problems, as exceptional as they have been, many of the problems themselves are still not new for low-income families. Communities that were already struggling, struggle even more. People who are vulnerable to begin with, those with low incomes, fewer assets, lower levels of education, they've had a more difficult time weathering the storm. The same is true for communities that are already relatively poor in terms of the human capital and the human stock. To solve these problems, my own minister says something that I remember. He says, to understand, to solve problems, we must first understand them and diagnose them correctly. Minister Humphrey, that is your quote. I'm using that from you. In the 1950s and the 1960s, when Dame Ermie was on the ground walking the length and breadth of St. Andrew, she was troubled by the incidents of poverty. And that drove her to focus heavily on empowerment of women and the development of training programs that gave women an opportunity. So last year, Ramel talked about how we had the Handicraft Center. He talked about the training and the resource center in the Belle Plaine area. He talked about pottery training. Those are all important training programs that Dame Ermie introduced into this program. When I read the transcripts of her contributions in Parliament and listen to stalwarts like Mrs. Simeon Belgrave, who I have not yet seen tonight, but I have to express my appreciation for him, who took my many calls. He answered every question I had, and he demonstrated a memory that I can't even begin to imagine. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with me and with us. But he talked to me about things like the training program and how rural women at the time came into the Belle Plaine Community Center, benefited from training, benefited from handicraft training, and then took that training, created wares, and became hawkers in urban areas. And they used that to support their families and to augment their incomes. We're talking about some of those very issues in a different incarnation today. We also dealt at the time last year with the question of soil erosion, and I'm going to spend a few moments on this particular issue. Long before there was a UN Conference on Sustainable Development in 1992, Dame Ermie was talking about soil erosion. Long before there were global conferences on climate change and land degradation and reforestation, Dame Ermie was talking about the Scotland District and land degradation. She was talking about the need to ensure that the people who lived in those communities had livelihoods. She was before her time. So I was amused when I was reading through the Hansard records of her interventions, and it said, she was talking to a colleague, I believe he was from St. John, and he was challenging her when she was talking about some of the issues in the Scotland District, and she said, the day in which I have to take directions from the honourable member on the way in which I should make my speech is a day I would find myself in a lunatic asylum. She was intervening at the time on the condition of roads, land slippage, and the utilization of the state of lands formerly owned by private landowners to ensure that residents of St. Andrew had access to roads and address the vexing issues of soil erosion and land degradation. She was, long before all of the think tanks started to narrate these things, she was telling the story. Then when you went on then in 2008, Dr. Leonard Nurse wrote a paper in 2008, and he talks about a 1965 paper by Vernon and Carroll on the Scotland District. You understood when you read the reports on the Scotland District that Dame Ermie had every reason to be fierce about her need to intervene in the area. In that paper, Dr. Nurse says this. He says the earliest recorded landslide appears to have been a deep sleeted slide in the vicinity of St. Elizabeth Village in October 1785. Then another at Boscobel in October 1901. And then less dramatic events were recorded at Sedge Pond in 1934 and at Turner's Hall in 1966. By 1971, it was reported that about half of the Scotland District manifested problems of erosion or unstable ground at the time. He ended by saying that the Scotland District is clearly a priority area of land degradation. Dame Ermie was relentless on this issue. During her time, she has to her credit, as the representative of St. Andrew, bringing the Soil Conservation Act in 1959, being an advocate for that, as well as the Soil Conservation Unit. Those were among her accomplishments. But this is where I found this interesting. When the Labour Party lost the government in the election of 1961, much of the work envisioned for the area was parked for 10 years. It was not until the election of 1976, when the Labour Party was returned to office, that the work began again in earnest. Former Prime Minister Oenafu, who also I have to thank for taking the time to give me access to his impressive library at the University of the West Indies, he shared with me one of his last acts in 2007 before the 2008 election, the passage of the Scotland District Authority Bill, which sought to bring the multiple agencies functioning in the Scotland District under one umbrella. This would have honoured Dame Ermie's tireless work without question. But then the party lost the election of 2008, and the bill was never proclaimed, and the area has been starved of development resources for yet another 10 years. Another decade later, now in 2019, we are at the moment where we must reopen discussion on the way forward for the Scotland District. I hope we are detecting a certain pattern here. Prime Minister Motley recently said she doesn't quite often remember things that begin with D. And that's probably understandable, because when you look at that history, it looks like the things with D often have a history of 10-year gaps. We also have lost several decades, not just one. So as with community engagement, education and training, we have to ask ourselves, what would the work that Dame Ermie started on soil conservation in the Scotland District look like in 2019 Barbados? Well, first, how many people outside of the area I did not know knew that the Scotland District is a summit of an elongated submarine mountain range that is several hundred kilometers long, extending from Trinidad to Puerto Rico? The district, Scotland District, is the only location in the entire Caribbean where this mountain range is above water. I didn't know that. That is a phenomenal thing. Not only, therefore, is this area ideal for designation as a protected national park, but it arguably, possibly, maybe, even meets the criteria to have Barbados' next World Heritage designation assigned to it. I took a moment to go through the criteria, and I found at least 4, possibly even 5, that we may have an opportunity to consider for the Scotland District. Can you imagine Dame Ermie's joy at seeing the agencies working together to protect the Scotland District? The beautiful lakes and shrubbery that have now been overtaken by it, functioning as a conservation park that houses sustainably built research laboratories, not just administrative offices dedicated, Senator McConney, to innovation around land use and degradation, innovation around soil conservation, biodiversity, and creating enterprise opportunities for rural communities in St. Andrew and the neighboring parishes. This has to be St. Andrew's legacy commitment to Dame Ermie. Given her commitment to training, I can see her smiling at the idea of St. Andrew being the home of the first agricultural institute dedicated to training communities who have farming in their blood in new technologies and agricultural innovation. Here, the modern techniques of agricultural development would be blended with innovation and research, technology, and technology disruption. Now, I spent a lot of time in the University of the West Indies, where I am full-time employed. And I know everybody's laughing. But the Faculty of Agriculture in the UWI at St. Augustine, for example, absorbs intake every year from graduates of the agricultural colleges in Trinidad and in Jamaica. The time, perhaps, has also come for a modern incarnation of Dame Ermie's plantation labor vision to come to St. Andrew and the rural communities. We could have, right here, training of university and college graduates in modern agriculture in the heart of the agricultural and rural belt of Barbados. We could have, right here, a fully accredited tertiary level institute in the parish to honor her with the work that she started in our own modern installation. Perhaps, Prime Minister says, and when we were going into the first year, for the beginning of the administration, I remember one of her first speeches, Prime Minister said, our domestic policy must be matched by our foreign policy, and there must be the opposite relationship in everything that we do. Perhaps countries like Israel and Australia, who have distinguished themselves in the area of agricultural innovation and disruption. Even in the offshore education sector, Minister Bradshaw, we can attract and establish an offshore university right here in St. Andrew. as a modern installation of Dame Ermie's vision. I can see it now. In my mind's eye, it's clear. The men and women of rural Barbados, born and raised in the land, people who know this area intuitively, bring in their traditional knowledge and artisanal skills to stand along the capital of an investor, Senator Adams and Professor Prasad, the technology and innovation of a research institute, all augmented by the validation of certification opportunities for their second and third generations. This was Dame Ermie's vision. There is an entire wave of new opportunity that is planted right here in the legacy of Dame Ermie. I want you to imagine, particularly urban members of Parliament, St. Andrew and rural communities feeding the nation and partnering with urban communities with access to factories to add value to primary production. If you read her intervention in the House of Assembly on June 20th, 1961, she talked extensively about these issues, and you will see how you can honor her legacy and tell her story. She said this: 60% of the animals produced in St. Andrew are supplied for market purposes to feed the people of this nation. At the time, she talked about the importance of rainfall and animal husbandry. She also brought handicraft, needlecraft, basketry to St. Andrew, and she dreamed of the opportunity of youth being able to grow the industrial wing built onto this Alleyne school and the establishment of the Girls' Industrial Union and Handicraft Center. They're all in St. Andrew. We are now to take what she started even further. And so the pottery industry here is an important part of that. She was instrumental in driving the pottery industry. But like agriculture, like community development, like her investment in families, we can go further. In preparing for tonight, I took a look, because I like trade sometimes, I took a look at what potters and what the pottery industry is doing in places like Italy. Here they have dominated sectors like the tile industry. Technology and innovation have transformed their sectors that started not much differently than ours. They've created entire livelihoods for communities and built thriving enterprises, generational enterprises, started by a grandfather, continued by a father, run by a son, providing employment for siblings. That's what they have done in generational businesses. We have an opportunity to do that right here with an advanced pottery industry that drives new sectors for Barbados. Just as solar energy did for water heating in Barbados, clay-tone tiles, also from the clay, was pioneered in St. Andrew. We can do that again, built on the artisanal principles of this parish. When I was speaking to Mr. Belgrave, I asked him, did the corporate community at the time, the merchant class, donate much to Dame Ermie's work in the community? And he said to me, well, when there were sports competitions and when there were school competitions, the plantations and the merchants and the shopkeepers, they gave quite a bit and they celebrated with prizes. St. Andrew, the time has come to draw the corporate community further into your bosom. The time has come where the movers and the shakers of many of our top corporate enterprises were birthed right here in the belly of your rural parishes, like St. Andrew. We have to create an opportunity for them to give back. And so I'm hoping, as I was talking to Mr. Belgrave, I said to him, I was hoping that in 2020, when we have the gathering and the overseas diaspora comes back home and they're going parish by parish, I coined a term at the time, the local diaspora, that those of us from St. Andrew who now live in other parishes in Christchurch or in St. Michael in urban areas, come back, give back into your communities and build your own development, build enterprises. Senator Springer, he said, I married into St. Andrew, I did. And the young man I married from St. Andrew, he's not young anymore. I hope you're listening. He was supposed to be here tonight and then he took it upon himself to travel, but he promises that he's watching, so I hope he is. He would always tell me stories about how he would leave Hillaby Turner's Hall Primary School and instead of going home, would sneak out onto the field to play cricket. He would go into the gullies. He would get a song cocktail when he got home, but the next day he would repeat it again. He loves cricket and he played it every day for years, every Saturday. Today, he's still into cricket, but on the enterprise side. And I'm confident that he intends to give back to this parish. We need more just like that, giving back into St. Andrew. Dame Ermie would welcome that. That is what she taught us needs to be our story. Minister Cattle, Professor Prasad, Dame Ermie would not have used the term green economy. She would not have used the term green energy bonds. She would not have spoken about things like green climate financing. But she talked a lot about areas like Sedge Pond, St. Simons, Bawdens, issues of water resources, things that are easily identified in a modern context now as key components in the green economy. Today, there are any number of funds available to access development resources for rural Barbados. A combination of green financing and social impact investment funds can be the focus of rural areas and support green interventions in key areas. Agencies like Invest Barbados, perhaps, can have an important role to play in matching green economy opportunities in rural communities with green investment attraction strategies. In many of our communities, including here in Belle Plaine, resource centers were hubs for community development. Over time, they developed into spaces where we taught people technology, using computers. How do you type on a computer? How do you input data? Time has evolved. The concept of the community centers and training in the community centers, which Dame Ermie started, also must too. But what is the modern incarnation of this? Technology in the community to promote innovation in agriculture, maybe? In design for the pottery industry, maybe AutoCAD now for the pottery industry. What are the new innovations that can emerge from St. Andrew based on its uniqueness? There was this evening a Girls in ICT event at the LESC. Can we create a special incubator, a special accelerator for rural innovation in communities like St. Andrew? Colleagues, if I had all night, we could continue to map the road that Dame Ermie and others have mapped out for us. This was a road that was walked by people from this community, like Mother Jilks. Many of you from the St. Andrew, from the Orange Hill area, you know her. I called her grandma. That was a family that I married into. You can walk the road of people like Irma Rock, people from St. Andrew who became the leading female entrepreneur in Barbados with the Rockland Bus Company and the gas station in Belle Plaine. People like Muriel Lee, who the young man I married used to, when he was at university, leave his home every night when he was not at Grandma in Orange Hill and go to Ms. Lee's house to deal with counting the money from the minibuses when they came in every night. Many of you know the modern incarnation of Muriel Lee's legacy. These are the things that are generational. We have to know and tell the story of rural excellence, of community development, of stalwarts and innovators and pioneers like Dame Ermie, who left us a legacy that is deeply embedded in our spirit, in our consciousness, and is very much a part of our identity. We have to know, we have to tell, we have to share our stories. And our young people need to know how we came to be at every place and space in time, and those involved in getting us here. There is an old South African proverb that says this: a young bird does not crow until it hears the old ones. We need to ensure that our young ones hear exactly where they have come from, and that we set them on a trajectory that Dame Ermie will rejoice at, that others who have been impressed by her, who have been influenced by her, who have been steered by her, will be able to say, we have honored her legacy. She has left us a legacy for rural Barbados, and we must continue to honor it. Thank you.
We will now take this opportunity to open the floor to a question and answer session. there's going to be a mic as is placed in the middle of the aisle for those persons who want to ask a question in relation to the speaker. Please step forward. Oh, I'm sorry. We are now open to a question and answer session. Should you have a question for our speaker, we would ask you to kindly walk to the middle aisle where there's a microphone available where you can ask your very pertinent question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't all come at once. Hi, Peter.
Good evening.
We can hear you.
Good evening, Senator Cummins, Lisa. My name is Peter Thompson. I'm a Barbadian and Canadian, and I have returned to Barbados 2 years ago after 40-something years away. But my father was from Belplain, my grandmother was from Belplain, my grandfather was from St. Simons.
Wow.
We still own land down in Lakes. And so, even though it's been a long time, part of me is always from St. Andrew. When I was a little boy, my first understanding, not only of St. Andrew, but of Barbados, was when my dad used to take the whole family several times a year to visit our relatives who lived in Belplain, who lived in very severe circumstances. And we would take them large boxes of just stuff to get by. And that has left me with an abiding understanding of what you spoke of to begin with, that if I have, others must also have. But in your very lovely speech, you did not touch on what the established private sector needs to do. Land ownership in Barbados is a legacy of a brutal history. And it takes more than education to build entrepreneurs and enterprises. And I wanted to know if you had any thoughts about fixing those historical deficits, both the deficit in adequate land distribution and the deficit in adequate capital distribution for rural development.
Thanks, Peter. When I was coming here, I obviously had no way of anticipating some of the questions, but it's an interesting thing that you've asked. I took a moment to go on Carib List, for example, to see what land and what property was available in St. Andrew, at least that was published. And I was struck by the fact that in no price range, in every price range, I think, there were probably maybe 3 houses for sale in all of St. Andrew, and there were maybe about 10 tracts of land that were available for sale in St. Andrew. Now, I say that knowing that it may not be that that is all there is, it's that that is what was listed. So the question of landlessness, I say that and I park it, and I'm going to come back to where Dame Ermie began. One of the key anthems for her was the question of landlessness. And when you talked about, there were 3 plantations and they were divided up, and people who worked on a plantation then each had an acre or so, and then they created their small farms, chicken farming, pig farming, and they reared those farms. Whether those farms have continued in generations and successively been passed on is unclear. Quite possibly they may have been. But the ability for new land acquisition in St. Andrew is something that perhaps would have to be explored. But what I can say to you is that on the market right now, from what I have seen, there has not been a lot of land available for purchase, as you have discussed. So I'm assuming, could be wrong, that it is still held by families. So the question then becomes, how do you use that land that is held ancestrally? What do you do with generations? Do you create new enterprises? You have the opportunities. For example, I mentioned new farming opportunities and innovation. Dame Ermie, for example, she lived in a space where there were lots of shops. When the supermarket came in Belle Plaine, the shops disappeared one by one, and you didn't have as many shops available. So it changed over time. And so what has to now be done, in my view, is that there has to be an assessment of what is available, who is still living in dire circumstances, and what needs to be done for those. And I think that that work is ongoing under the relevant ministries, but perhaps there is an opportunity here out of this discussion for you to identify new areas that could be looked at. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Senator, for a very inspiring lecture. A lecture that really made us think much more about the possibilities about the rural economy and how the rural economy can have these new possibilities that are just as much technological and innovative as in the urban economy. I was particularly interested when you talked about the pottery industry. Well, what are some of the possibilities of how that industry could evolve today?
So, in places like Italy, and I use the Italian example because Italian tiles, most of the tiles, if you look at our trade profiles, most of the tiles that are imported into Barbados actually originate from Italy. One of the largest exports from Italy is tiles. And a lot of that is two different types of clay, one of which we have right here in Barbados. And they've been able to use technology. They spent a lot of time and money innovating, using research to develop the clay industry into ceramic and what they call wall and floor tiles, and I believe we have an opportunity. I'm fascinated by things like earthworks. I love earthworks, and I've been to some offices, for example, government offices and others, and been traumatized by the fact that I'm seeing very dainty teacups and saucers, but they're not authentic. They're not part of our identity and our story. And we have an opportunity even here to take advantage of that. There are models in Canada, for example, where Canada requires new building constructions, to purchase local artisanal art. Pottery can be created as a market for things like that. And we have an opportunity right here in St. Andrew because this is the heart of the industry. The clay industry is right there, and it's one of the things that Dame Ermie started that is still going. Any other questions? Yeah. If not, thank you again. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is at this time that I ask the Right Honorable Maya Amour Motley, QC MP, Prime Minister of Barbados, to give the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished members of Cabinet, distinguished Barbadians all, and of course the Lady of the Night, Senator Lisa Cummins, who delivered a lecture that I want to suggest to you that the future will recall that any work that we do for the designation of the Scotland District as a World Heritage Site will claim its genesis here this evening at Alleyne School from you. And I must confess that I was not aware of the linkage from Trinidad to Puerto Rico, or that along that mountain range that we were the only ones with enough rebellious nature in ourselves to see an oceanic upthrust here within the jurisdiction of Barbados. But that doesn't surprise me either, because the rugged nature of the East Coast is in fact matched by the rugged nature of the people who are born of the East Coast. And anyone who has spent sufficient time in St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. John, to a lesser extent St. Lucy and St. Philip, will understand exactly what I mean. And I'm therefore not surprised, and thank you, Lisa, for building on what Rommel started last year with telling the story of Ermie Bourne, which is not only a story of gender or a story of a woman triumphing against the odds, but it is also a story of our nation. It is a story that explains why it is possible for us to still contemplate our rural society on 166 square miles, an area that is smaller than the size of JFK Airport. It is the story of a people who recognize that that spirit, that courage to effectively match what the rest of the Caribbean wrote and spoke about in terms of the West Indian peasantry, but which somehow got lost in the narrative and the history of Barbados, is right here. And I completely agree with you that we have to ensure that that story is told. And that is why I want to commend George, you as Member of Parliament, for not only understanding the importance of preserving Ermie Bourne's legacy, but for championing the cause of wanting to establish a museum in this parish, which this government has already agreed to, and which indeed you have started the process with the negotiations on the land with respect to the acquisition of the property for the establishment of that university. I came this evening from another amazing event of young girls this time. Girls under the age of 17, 18, from as young as 11, 12. Girls from across our secondary schools who participated all day today in a girls' hackathon. And a hackathon simply is a group of people coming together to learn how to work together in the delivery and the application of computer applications or programming. And those girls, Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology spent most of the day with them, and Amber. But those girls challenged those who were there to understand and appreciate that they were truly global citizens. And their themes revolved primarily around climate change and gender-based violence. Climate change and gender-based violence. But there was a courage with respect to their perspectives and an understanding that they were global citizens and not just secondary school children from Barbados. And when we begin to understand the talent that we have, what you saw on this stage tonight from Alleyne School Orchestra, what you continue to see across this country, what I saw today with these young girls, you begin to appreciate why this government has chosen to bet on the young people of this nation to secure our future. And as Lisa told you, that was who Dame Ermie Bourne and Grantley Adams were also betting on. That is why we reintroduce tertiary education free of charge for all Barbadians, because no child from Bordens or from Bush Hall, from Pennyhole or from Rock Hall in St. Lucy should ever have to wonder how they can complete their studies, how they can be the best that they can be because of an inability to pay. But it isn't only about university education. It is also about the other layers that we have put our money where our mouth is. The monies that have been delivered to the ministries of culture and sports for the mass-based training that will start now. The monies that have been delivered for the Sea Cadet program, for 1,000 Sea Cadets from St. Lucie to St. Philip, the monies that have been delivered for the Prince's Trust, for 1,000 young people to be able to become involved and to become the best that they can be and not to be intimidated by life circumstances or by the people with whom they interact. Or the decision taken by the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, in my opinion, that is most forward-thinking. When we did the estimates of this year, we saw a considerable rise in dialysis patients across this country. And only yesterday I met once again with a distinguished Barbadian who, having done well internationally, Kurt Lambert, has opened a clinic here in Carrington Village, but is also working with the government and the Maria Holder Center, Diabetes Center, to be able to help us deal with it. But we recognize that we have to get at the core of the problem. And the QEH, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, has agreed that it will hire just over 30 community nurses. I think it is close to 40, but please don't quote me on the exact number, to be able to work in communities from St. Lucie to St. Philip, across St. Andrew and St. Joseph, across this nation, to go to people where they are, to fight that battle of chronic NCDs that is shortening the lives of our citizens, impairing the ability of our citizens to be able to live full and fruitful lives. But it doesn't end there, because having discussed the issues of education and training and health to you, and having obliquely referred to the majesty of this area, we come to the reality of what has happened. And Lisa said enough to let you know that the whole issue of land degradation in St. Andrew has been an issue that has plagued this country for centuries because of the very geological nature of what we're dealing with. 1/7 of our land area, fundamentally oceanic upsurge clay as opposed to the coral. And anybody who has experienced the contempt and the ignoring of this parish and the parish of St. Joseph and St. John for the last decade will see that the roads, as you move through Foster Hall, as you move from Andromeda down to Concept Bay, are the closest experience to the Disney World experience outside of the United States of America. Now, it can cause us a moment of laughter, but the truth is, it is no laughing issue. We have seen a government ignore the reality of the underwater streams, the movement of land, the degradation, and in fact the actual erosion and falling into the ocean of land at Glen Burnie and elsewhere, and do nothing about it. And our government made a commitment even before office, and I want to say to the people of White Hill that that is not an abracadabra moment either, but that this government is working assiduously, not just to solve the problems of White Hill, but to put together a program to work with our international partners that will see the restoration of roads and the stabilization of the land in the Scotland district, because too many of our people have been ignored who live in this part of Barbados. But that plan is not only top-down for government, it is bottom-up for you. It is about getting you to plant the fruit trees that hitherto people were satisfied only to reflect that they were being planted at Haggett's. But you need them in every yard. You need them on every plot across this area. It is for us to provide the water, yes. And I am happy to share with you that over the course of the last week, and I'm sorry that Minister Abrams is out of the island as I share this with you, that we have worked with the engineers, both locally and outside, with the Water Authority, and have the makings of what we believe to be a plan to be executed over the course of the next 12 months that we hope will bring relief to the people of the North. That plan will cost us initially about $15 million, but it is significant that there has been a failure to review how we manage the hydraulics of a water system that is more than a century old. And that we continue to believe that the physical infrastructure that we have inherited is sufficient to be able to do the things that are necessary to guarantee access to water. And there's a very simple premise that suddenly made absolute sense when we put it to the Water Authority. That you cannot continue to use reservoirs and pumping stations in the highly elevated areas to have to carry the burden of supporting and supplying water to both low and high elevations. The government of Barbados we discovered, that the Barbados Water Authority continues to pay for water at Groves in St. Philip, that it does not fully use because the last government negotiated a take-or-pay contract. But it is important that we use that water because we're paying for it already. And to that extent, therefore, we have agreed in principle to fund a capital works program that will be dedicated to deliver water to the lower elevations of the East Coast, such that that water being delivered now at Golden Ridge, Bowmanston and Hampton to both low and high elevations can be reserved for purely the higher elevations in St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. Lucie. It will mean that we will put in a new pumping house at Vineyard, that we will have to build a new reservoir, complete new reservoir at Stuart Hill, that we will have to run pipe from Stuart Hill to the East Coast to ensure access to water for persons on the East Coast, and that we will have equally to address the problem from the north as well. And that if we can therefore supply the water to the East Coast of the country, we can guarantee that we can reserve and preserve the water at Golden Ridge, at Hampton and at Bowmanston for the northern elevations, while at the same time addressing an additional source of water in the north, which we are working on. Now, these are not abracadabra moments. And one of the significant points made by Senator Cummins in her speech was the need to be able to stay the course on a lot of the issues that we are fighting to put in place. Our environment and our institutions were not destroyed overnight. They will not be rebuilt overnight. The beauty of us belonging to a party rather than being lone rangers is that the mission is common. And whether I am here or whether George is here, this is the mission of the Barbados Labour Party. The last point that I'd like to make is that from its very beginnings, the Barbados Labour Party was a party and still is a party that believes in decentralization. Whether under the leadership of Sir Grantley Herbert Adams, Tom Adams, Bree St. John, Owen Arthur, we have committed Hugh Gordon Cummins to a form of governance and government that is fundamentally about decentralizing power and empowering persons at the community level. And our commitment, whether it is in our refusal to accept that there should be a concentration of legal power in Bridgetown, such that you don't have magistrates' courts functioning in districts, or our commitment to abolish the current framework for dealing with family law and to replace it by the end of 2020, early 2021, with a new family law court that will be a hybrid court with regional jurisdiction, but that will also remove the dastardly discrimination against single women in this country who are forced to go to magistrates' courts while married women go to the High Court. Or whether it is in terms of continuing to support the delivery of primary education in communities as far as possible, rather than the consolidation of primary schools into large enterprises that take away from the parochial and communal nature of what is necessary for our kids to retain that rural sense, that sense of commitment to a rural society, we are going to fight for it as a party. It means working a little harder. It means sometimes it's not even always the most cost-efficient manner. But what we lose in terms of dollars and cents immediately, we pick back up in terms of social capital with respect to how we build this country. So I want to thank the Ermie Bourne Trust and the trustees of the Ermie Bourne Foundation. But in particular, George, I want to thank you, because this is a case of understanding that even though the voice is not heard, you know who has plotted every step and crafted every move and directed everything, and I may even say underwriting it all. And we know that the same insistence in which you put out these posters on a daily basis, sometimes 3 times a day, such that none of us could forget what was happening tonight, is the same passion that you have brought to representation to the people of St. Andrew. I am acutely aware, George, that you have come to represent St. Andrew yet again at the time of an IMF program. I am dealing with things on the basis of priorities. Water and stabilization of the infrastructure is the first priority for us, for the people of the North. The second one is for us to put the institutional framework for the Scotland District Authority in place after we do an appropriate rationalization of the other entities like the Soil Conservation Commission and others, which Lisa reminded us this evening, were also the genesis of the work of a previous Barbados Labour Party government and indeed of Dame Ermie Bourne as the Member of Parliament for this parish. But the other piece that is equally as important and is going to be the beneficiary of whatever relaxation in fiscal difficulties that we can find will be the resumption or the return of civic services to the people of St. Andrew. It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that from the gas station privately owned right back to the publicly owned services, that the people of this parish have been deprived year by year by year of the services that allowed them to stay in this wonderful climate and to be able to live their lives without having to go to Speightstown or without having to go to Six Roads or without having to go to the Glebe or then ultimately to Bridgetown. And our government, as I said, is committed to the decentralization of these services. And George, your name will forever stand as being the person whose voice has been heard loudest on this. The fact that we cannot start a police station tomorrow morning is not indicative of anything other than the fact that we have to respect the hierarchy of needs that we have inherited from an economy that was the 3rd most indebted country in the entire world. That we are, 15 months later, handling debt that has moved from 176% to roughly 118% and continuing to decline. That we have done that while still committing to the training needs and the educational needs of people where they are being found, that we are doing that while still addressing the needs of our schools with respect to the bad behavior that Minister Bradshaw is having to contend with, such that she can isolate the provisioning of stability for a handful no more than 200 youngsters, but 200 youngsters who can do the damage of a tsunami in a school if they are not given the appropriate attention and the appropriate stabilization. That we are doing that while still delivering community health care. That we are doing that while still delivering a feed program to take persons who are unemployed and who want to help feed our people by becoming participants in the community feed program of the Ministry of Agriculture that is reaching out to over 1,100 farmers. That we are doing that while still laying the framework for the 2 new sunrise industries of renewable energy and medical cannabis is significantly reflective of the fact that we will keep pushing through. Because without pushing through, Barbadians will not get to reap the bounty which both Dame Ermie and Sir Grantley and Tom and all who went before had in mind for them to be able to do. In life, sometimes we talk loud and we talk soft. Sometimes we walk and step high and we step low. Sometimes we see mountains and we see valleys. But what matters more than anything else is that we keep our eye on the sparrow. And if we keep our eye on the sparrow while not forgetting how we got here and for whom we are to be grateful for allowing us to be here, if we can do those 2 things together and keep passion and keep in mind that whatever else, we do this not to say we have run the race, but to make life easier for you and you and you and you and all of us, so that each can sleep easy at night, then we will have run our leg of the relay, such that those who come after to continue to salute Ermie Bourne will know that hers was a vision, but also a relay that was worthy of emulation by all who have come after. God bless the people of St. Andrew. God bless the Barbados Labour Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. We ask that you remain on stage to assist us with the presentation of the Ermie Bourne Medal of Honor, if you would please. We would also ask Minister Payne to accompany us and to introduce who will be the next recipient of the Ermie Bourne Medal of Honor as well. Very much so. Minister Payne, I would ask you to say a few words about the recipient of the Medal of Honor.
I tried to get away tonight, but it doesn't seem if it has worked. I'm not even told tonight who the recipient of honor is. That's not believable, according to the Prime Minister. But Darwin Goodrich is a pillar in St. Andrew, as was alluded to by one of the speakers who spoke here tonight. Personally, I do not know what I would have done in St. Andrew without the assistance of Mr. Goodrich. I first met him when I was the Minister of Housing. I'm a little ashamed to tell you how long ago that was. That was 25 years ago, 26 years ago, when I was the Minister of Housing. He was the Permanent Secretary in the ministry. And he actually told the lie to what is generally felt, that permanent secretaries and people who work in the civil service are not extremely efficient. He was super in every department. And I recall at the time I was also Minister of Public Works. You know, when I look at it now, back in 1994, I occupied the position that we have about 6 ministers dealing with at this particular point in time. But no reflection on the Prime Minister. But I must say the issues then are not like the type of issues that the issues that we have now, and these are issues which we've inherited. But Mr. Goodrich his performance was so stellar that when I recognized that we had a deficiency at Public Works in terms of the office that he held, this similar office, that I actually brought him to the Ministry of Public Works as well to correct a lot of the problems that we had there. And I must say that that period was the beginning of a relationship which has continued up to the present day. I find it hard to believe that a man, even after he retired, could leave Christchurch every single Thursday night and come to St. Andrew to perform a clinic for me. I was asking him one day if he was sure that he's not passing by St. Lucie on his way to Christchurch for some other reason, because I cannot imagine why a man would be so loyal to come every single Thursday night and perform that task. And when we thought, as a matter of fact, I might have been credited for the workings of the Ermie Bourne Foundation, but I think that Mr. Goodrich and Mr. Belgrove, can I say to a lesser extent, Mr. Belgrove, they are the people who push the idea of ensuring that the legacy of Ermie Bourne remains with us. And I am one of the people who I'm very proud of his achievement, and I certainly welcome this opportunity to honor Mr. Darwin Goodrich for the work he has done in this constituency and to the Ermie Bourne Foundation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as Mr. Darwin Goodrich enters the stage. He's accompanied by his daughter and grandchildren, to whom he would be one grandchild who will be accepting the award with him, and he accepts the award on their behalf.
Congratulations to Mr. Goodrich.
Prime Minister, Ministers of Government, other invited guests. What Minister Payne didn't tell you that I was born in Boscobel, St. Peter, a year before the Second World War started. And I know what rural Barbados was like during Dame Ermie Bourne's life here in St. Andrew. When Mr. Payne asked me to assist with the running the affairs of St. Andrew, it was not a problem because of my commitment to ensuring that rural Barbados was just as well endowed with roads and other entities as urban Barbados. Mr. Payne is a very persuasive individual, and apart from my assistance in St. Andrew, he didn't tell you that when the by-election in St. Joseph was held, which resulted in the election of the Attorney General to that constituency, he decided that he was going to assist his colleague, and that Kathy though his constituency secretary and I would have to join him on that road, on that journey. Subsequently, Mr. Payne insisted that I should have been manager of the St. Andrew and St. Joseph election campaign in the subsequent general elections. And more recently, when Neil Rowe was selected to be the candidate for St. Michael Northwest, I was called to Mr. Payne's office one morning to a meeting, and at that time he told me, you and Kathy are going to St. Michael Northwest along with St. Andrew. You know, knowing the gentleman as I do, I can't tell him no. But what I didn't tell you earlier was that when I was asked to go to St. Joseph on the first occasion, I was supposed to go to a meeting of the International Table Tennis Federation in Paris, France. This is the Congress of the International Table Tennis Federation, and I was a representative of Barbados and also the Caribbean community. And I decided that I would forego that chance to see Paris. I don't know if Mr. Payne, if I'll ever see it again, you may owe me a visit to Paris. You know, but so be it. But I said he's a very persuasive gentleman, and I have absolutely no difficulty in leaving St. Christchurch on Thursday nights. I'm very devoted to my children. My second granddaughter, she's in the back. She's a bit, I'm not sure why she hasn't come. But this has been my life, my children, and my commitment to St. Andrew and rural Barbados. It seems as though the time will soon come for me to pull stamps, because Mr. Payne has indicated that he may leave the campaign trail when the campaign starts in 2023. I don't know if I'll be alive, but if I am, and Mr. Payne pulls stamps, I'm pulling stamps along with him. So whoever is the candidate will have to seek someone else to assist them. So thank you very much for the opportunity. If I had to do it all over again, I would. As I say, you're a very persuasive gentleman, and it's not easy to say no to you. Thank you very much, and good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Darwin Goodridge, the recipient of the 2019 Ermie Bourne Medal of Honor. At this time, we ask Dr. Sandra O'Shea Springer to come to the stage to make a presentation of a token to our guest speaker. And we also invite back Senator to the stage to receive the token on behalf of the Ermie Bourne Foundation.
On behalf of the Ermie Bourne Foundation and the St. Andrew constituency, we thank you for what was a very insightful and very thoughtful and very forward-thinking lecture. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is at this time we will have our vote of thanks by one of our trustees, Ms. Tricia Henry.
Good night. The Honorable Mia Amor Motley, QC MP, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment,
Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew, Honorable George Payne, QC MP, Minister of Housing, Lands and Rural Development, Chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, members of the Cabinet of Barbados, President of the Senate, parliamentary secretaries, members of the Senate, chairmen, members of the clergy, representatives of the private sector, the media, specially invited guests, the BLP family, the viewing audience, respected ladies and gentlemen. As we conclude tonight's proceeding, it is my esteemed honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the St. Andrew branch of the Barbados Labour Party, the TCC Club, the Ermie Bourne Foundation, the St. Andrew Parish Independence Committee, and the Planning Committee for tonight's event in particular. It gives me immense pleasure to extend profound thanks to the first female Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable Mia Amor-Motley. We say thank you sincerely for taking the time from your demanding portfolio to join us in commemorating the life and the legacy of the late Ermie Bourne. Also, we wish to thank you for agreeing to present the closing remarks. Your words of wisdom are always an inspiration to us all. To my MP, Mr. George Walton Payne, we thank you. We recognize you as the Mayor of St. Andrew and the patron of the Ermie Bourne Foundation. We say thank you for your continued support and encouragement. We say thank you for your continued support and encouragement. You have followed in the footsteps of Dame Ermie as a representative for St. Andrew, and you have always sought to empower your female constituents. We are because of you. We say thank you, Mr. Payne. Senator Lisa Cummins, again, we start here, and you quoted Dame Ermie, I am because you are. We recognize the importance of volunteerism within the rural parishes and the contributions that she would have made. Even though Dame Ermie was not a national leader, she fought for us all at the grassroots level, and she tackled key issues that are still relevant here today. Senator Cummins, you would have given us many pointers and planted many seeds in our minds. Dame Ermie would have urged residents to give back to the parish and recommended and gave consideration of an institution of to have an agriculture university as a modern tribute of the work of the late Dame Ermie. Your recognition that we deserve heritage designation of the Scotland District as a World Heritage Site was also an important fact that we all would have noted. And also, your suggestion where we would build partnerships with the private sector and share information that was disseminated here tonight, all was worthwhile, and the continued effort to be made by the Ermie Bourne Foundation to recognize the tributes and all that Dame Ermie would have done. It provides hope for a brighter future for St. Andrew and the rural parishes of Barbados, not just St. Andrew alone, but for the greater Barbados and the whole. I would also like to thank Pastor Andrew Campbell. Your contribution here tonight was recognized, and we thank you for agreeing to bless tonight's proceedings. Okay, I'm not seeing Natalie in the audience, but Natalie, what a welcome you gave tonight. You just gave us a tiny glimpse of the excellence that was expected to be here tonight when you started with your welcome. To my fellow parish ambassadors, thank you. We appreciate your presentation here tonight, and we know that your project, it also ties into the fact that we are recognizing Dame Ermie's contributions. She would have not been a recognized national hero, but we in St. Andrew recognize her as a national hero. So we want to thank you for your presentation tonight, and I hope persons will go away taking away information about our project this year. Tamisha White, Tamisha, thank you for your overview of the importance of the foundation, and I just want to thank each and everyone who would have worked hard with the foundation and making it what it is tonight. The entertainment by Tamisha White, Push and Go Through. We would push and go through for 2020 as we're already planning for 2020. The regathering, J. Slow, we had a wonderful and powerful performance by you tonight, and we want to also thank you to Beijing Green the Band. I have to get that correct because I keep saying Project X, but Beijing Green the Band, thank you. Thank you to Senator Dr. Ramel Springer for your introduction of the keynote speaker. Okay, I am missing one paper. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Okay. Special mention has to be made to Parish and to Minister John King for their contributions to tonight's proceedings. Minister King, you gave us the lovely band that we had here playing for us tonight. And what I would like to say is, if I have omitted anyone by mistake, I just want to thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you and have a good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded Thank you, Sonia.
You're welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have concluded our night's proceedings, and we pray that you will journey home safely. But prior to that, we'd like you to join us in some light refreshments, just like we do it every year in St. Andrew. Thank you and good night.
Good night.